In the Russian armed forces, in the midst of their offensive in the Kursk region, began to have problems in the Belgorod region border area. A number of Z channels wrote in panic about a large-scale breakthrough of the Ukrainian armed forces across the border. Dialog media outlet found out what actually happened. The informations confirm the intensification of fighting between the Ukrainian Defense Forces and the Russian Armed Forces in several areas in the Belgorod region of the Russian Federation. Presumably, the clashes occurred near the villages of Demidovka, Maryino, Prilesye and Liptsy. The VChK-OGPU channel, which is associated with the Russian Special Services, claims that the Russian Federation has begun an urgent evacuation of residents of the border village of Krasnaya Yaruga and other settlements in this region. The Ukrainian Armed Forces filled the ditch right during the day and removed the dragon's teeth. Fighting is underway. It is expected that the Ukrainian Armed Forces will use reserves at night. If this happens, the situation for the Russian Armed Forces will become very difficult, the Russian channel wrote. He claims that military special forces of the Russian Armed Forces were urgently deployed to the area. Another fist strike is expected in the area of the village of Zolochiv, Kharkiv region. The Ukrainian Armed Forces have amassed significant forces, the Russian resource wrote. Z channel, Northern channel, associated with the Russian army, also expects a more powerful strike by the Ukrainian Armed Forces. There is still movement on the border. Enemy groups are prowling along the line and are not sitting idle. Small groups are probing our positions and sappers are clearing passages. It does not look like such things are being done for no reason. The enemy is preparing a site and is going to use it, he said. Russian military expert Yan Matveyev, commenting on the intensification of fighting in the Belgorod region, suggested that this is an attempt to pull Russian forces away from the Kursk direction. All this does not look like a full-fledged offensive, but rather a serious diversionary maneuver to force the Russian command to transfer forces from the Kursk region to defend the rest of the border. It is too early to draw serious conclusions, he wrote on Telegram. The statement was made by the head of the Center for Countering Disinformation of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Andriy Kovalenko. According to him, the fighting is the result of the activity of the Russian forces in this area. The Russians brought troops to the border in Belgorod region. Their sabotage groups were operating. Of course, in such cases, the defense forces act and neutralize the threats, the officer wrote. This information was confirmed by a serviceman of the Ukrainian Armed Forces who anonymously runs a blog called Bakhmut Demon. The Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group tried to enter from the Belgorod side. In response, they received, and ours entered the territory of the Belgorod region. But there is no talk of breaking through the border yet, the Ukrainian Armed Forces soldier assured.
Russian army soldiers have shot down with small arms an unmanned aerial vehicle, which they mistook for a Ukrainian drone. The relevant footage was shared on Telegram channels. The occupiers who inspected the downed drone that crushed to the ground and burned, realized they had made another mistake. One of the Russian soldiers said that the drone's wing did not belong to a Ukrainian drone. However, the Russian soldiers did not admit their mistakes and presented what happened as an ordinary incident. It should be noted that this is not the first case of Russian soldiers shooting down their own drone.
Прямо красавчики. Одно крыло только. Тут не ходит по клятке, да, крыло там. Есть, но пиздец. Чай расхуярено, конечно. Сломалось, да? Красавчики, да, мы все работаем.
Russia's armor losses in the war against Ukraine are horrific, but among the thousands of tanks lost, there is not a single Armata, Russia's most advanced tank. That's because it never saw combat. Former Pentagon consultant Reuben Johnson explains what's wrong with this tank on the pages of 1945. Russia first showed off its T-14 Armata in 2015 at the annual Victory Day parade in Moscow, and during that first demonstration, the T-14 broke down right on Red Square. However, this comical episode does not really explain the Armata's absence from the front. In fact, the problem is not only the vehicle's low reliability, but also its exorbitant cost. The T-14 is indeed a fairly complex and advanced tank in many ways, Johnson writes, and that makes it so expensive that it becomes foolish to use it in combat. The head of one of the Ukrainian defense companies compared the Armata to an expensive Italian sports car, which seems like a miracle of technology while it is on display in a car shop, but during everyday use, its blatant impracticality and unsuitability for driving on ordinary roads comes to light. As the author of the publication notes, the T-14 does indeed have an advanced design, and its systems are a significant step up from previous generations of Russian tanks. For example, it is so highly computerized that it could, in theory, operate as an unmanned tank. But these new high technologies buried the Armata. In addition to the low reliability that is typical for the new generation of any equipment, the T-14 also turned out to be absurdly expensive. It is believed that the Armata costs from $5 to $9 million per unit. Sergei Chemezov, the head of the Russian defense consortium Rostec, and a long-time close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, officially stated that the T-14 is too expensive to send to Ukraine. According to Chemezov, it is easier for the Russian military to buy older T-90s than to send T-14s to Ukraine. Note that the cost of a new T-90M is about $1.5 million. This seems to be the tank's fate both now and in the future. The level of losses in high-tech combat and the need for simpler weapons that are easier to repair make the T-14 Armata impractical. The author of the publication concludes,